Welcome to a new weekly series, The Underrated Game of the Week, where I'm going to highlight a game that most fans will not watch, but they should. These games are going to be exclusively from the G5, and let's get right into our featured matchup of Week 1. The Boise State Broncos travel to take on the South Florida Bulls. Game's on ESPN at 5:30 Eastern Standard Time. I'm used to Central, so that was throwing me off. The total here is 63.5 on an over-under. Line Boise -6. Why is this game intriguing? These are two of the top 5 G5 teams in the country. And if it wasn't for Florida and Miami in the non-con for South Florida, I think this is likely a playoff eliminator game where one of these teams, Boise's in contention certainly, and they're probably the likely favorite to be in the college football playoff. But with this one spot on the line, South Florida's got plenty of talent to be able to make a run at that thing if they can get through one of Miami or Florida after this game. On the Boise side, everyone's going to focus on the loss of Ashton Jeanty, but we've seen this story play out a number of times with the likes of Doug Martin, Jay Ajayi, Alexander Madison, George Halani, just to name a few. Now it's really set up for Sire Gaines and or Jombre Breezy Dubar to assume that mantle. I think Gaines gets the first crack at it, but I think Dubar has plenty of talent to be able to emerge if Gaines continues with his health struggles. The line is always stout. Left tackle Cage Casey, he's going to be a standout along that line. Right tackle is probably the biggest weakness along it. And the continuity of Maddox Madsen at quarterback, Latrell Caples, and Matt Lauder give them a solid pass game base to build from. Big fan of Matt Lauder. I think he has a monster season this year. Defensively, they arguably took a bigger hit than the loss of Jeanty, as there is a good bit of turnover on this defense. And I think their biggest struggle is going to be along that front seven, where they're a little stronger on the back end. On the South Florida side, anytime Byron Brown, the quarterback, takes the field, he's a dangerous weapon. Health issues limited him last season and put a damper on that year. But as I highlighted in my top 3 G5 quarterbacks, Brown is just a difference maker. He's right up there with Lenore Sellers as far as how good he is back in the pocket and how dangerous he is with his legs and arm. You put an experienced line, it is a little bit worse, but it is an experienced offensive line with plenty of guys with starting experience. And you have solid skill players around him. Cartavius Norton, former Iowa State running back, is now his running back. It's just a challenge for even the best defenses. They're strong off the edge of the defensive line, but a little bit softer in the middle on that side of the ball. And that's where they're going to have to be cognizant. They're extremely strong at the second level with the linebackers. They have a decent cornerback duo, but overall, the front seven's definitely the strength of this South Florida defense, and the secondary is definitely the weakness. And so that experienced passing attack on the Boise side is going to be tough for them to handle, specifically up the seams. Looking into what I think about this game, there's 3 major X factors going for South Florida here. They're playing at home. It's hot early in the season in Florida, and Boise's going to struggle with that heat. Cramping is going to be a big issue. They do have the depth capable of handling that. And then the biggest one, Byron Brown's healthy. If he's healthy, they are a contender to win any game against almost any opponent outside of, let's say, the top 10 to 15 teams in the country, because Brown is that good at being able to make guys miss and play that way. Last year, if we look at it, Boise had a similar travel experience early in the season when they played at Georgia Southern to open the year, and they struggled mightily with them. It took Ashton Jeanty putting the team on his back late in that game to pull away finally, but it was a 56-40 something game, and that was really a struggle for those guys, and they didn't play any other games outside of the West Coast than that. Given the relative strengths of these two defenses, it's going to be interesting to see how Boise can exploit this South Florida secondary up the seams, like I said. And that's where Matt Lauder, Latrell Caples is going to use those crossing routes. And I think that's where they end up having to beat this team, is in between the hashes. And then they're going to have to gain traction on the ground up the middle of this defense. I think Malik Sherrod is probably... He's going to get some run, but I don't know that he's the best back equipped to take advantage of this South Florida defense. by comparison to Breezy Dubar and Sire Gaines. South Florida is going to want to attack this front seven with the combination of Cartavius Norton at running back and Byron Brown's legs. That's going to be where their best options are. And if Brown can extend some plays, he'd be able to get some of these wide receivers open and hit some big plays right out the jump. I lean betting South Florida +6 in this opening week underrated game of the week.